Welcome to the congregation of Yahweh, and Shabbat Shalom to everybody. The title of my message is called A Plea to Survivors. The preparation for this message has been difficult. I've prayed about it, asking Yahweh how to present this message in a way that is educational and encouraging. At the same time, the material contained in this is gut-wrenching. It will be concerning surviving childhood abuse, specifically to adult survivors. I've read 56 pages of documents written by people who have spent many years in this field and have gleaned important points to assist with this message. I've eliminated 99% of any talk that would be sensitive to viewers with young children present. What I do address will be correctly verbalized and very brief. Parents and caregivers, please consider this when viewing this message. This message is based on two scriptures. In Proverbs 22, verse 6, train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not turn away from it. Matthew chapter 18, verse 6, but whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble, it would be better for him that a millstone be hung around his neck and he be drowned in the depths of the sea. Out of the numerous problems that we have in the world today, seemingly too many to count, there is one problem that, in the general populace opinion, is something that has been ignored, undermined, disguised, diminished, denied, and slandered. This problem is child abuse. As a survivor of multiple forms of child abuse, I can tell you that my case, which was devastating to me, isn't as bad as one which you will see later on in this message. I have experienced what you've experienced. If you're out there and you have been through this, I know exactly what you're going through. And I have been restored to physical, spiritual, and emotional health only by the grace of Yahweh and His Son Yeshua. And I believe wholeheartedly that He can use my experience to help those who are dealing with the long-term effects of these terrible acts. The following reading comes from Richard Boyd, body and mind psychotherapist at the Energetics Institute, located in Perth, West Australia. Childhood sexual abuse is considered one of the worst forms of trauma, and its effects and long-term signs and symptoms are now found to span a large range of conditions, documented in the Psychiatric Reference Manual known as the Diagnostics and Statistical Manual of Psychiatric Disorders. Sexual abuse is considered soul murder, as it literally robs a child victim of their innocence, severely disrupts their developing ego structure and sense of self, and will later distort the then adult's ability to function and to form healthy relationships with themselves and others. Given a child is entirely dependent on adults for their safety, guidance, and appropriate gestures of love and nurturance, it is easy to see how this vulnerable group can be targeted and abused. Regardless of the reasons for the increased conscious awareness of childhood sexual abuse and the subsequent increasing reporting of such incidents, various studies in both Australia and America show that up to 1 in 5 women are reporting at least one incident of unwanted sexual touching by persons at least 5 years older than themselves before the age 18. Nearly 1 in 10 boys reported the same outcome in this same study. While sexual abuse cuts across all societal, demographic, socioeconomic, and geographical indicators, the evidence is that childhood sexual abuse most commonly occurs within families. The American study shows that 1 in 20 boys may also experience the same form of abuse. Biological fathers made up 2% of the source of the abuse in American studies, while in Australia had a smaller sample study. The figures were more like 10%. Stepfathers made up 17% of the source of abuse in the American study, whilst stepfather extended family members, not exactly a straight comparison, made up 36% of the Australian studies. Childhood sexual abuse appears to cut across all societies, demographics, and socioeconomic and religious groups. Some behaviors and coping mechanisms common to both groups can include impulses to abuse another person in some way, promiscuity or frigidity or fluctuations between the two, prostitution, alcohol or drug dependency, suicidal thinking or attempts, self-mutilation, abusive relationships or absence from relationships. There is a body of evidence that psychosomatic medical disorders are seen to accompany sexually abused children later in life. Case histories have shown that survivors can experience unexplained pelvic pains, irritable bowel syndrome, ectopic pregnancy, endometriosis, thrush, cervical cancers, and rashes. Adults who were sexually abused as children are often secretive and shame-based. This is often due to the dynamic in childhood where the adult abuser used threats or manipulation against the child in order to cover up and maintain the secret of abuse. Children instinctively trust adults to get their cues, reality, and guidance from the same adult that then abuses them. Common manipulation by the abuser of the child victim include telling them that the child enjoyed their game and are responsible for what's being done to them. How sick is that? How ill can that be? Another common threat is that the other parent or sibling will be hurt or killed if the victim tells anyone, or that they will be blamed and that no one will believe them. Some abusers play on the natural curiosity and tactile nature of the child and do not physically hurt the child. In these cases, the child will then grow up with guilt that they enjoyed it, and therefore are responsible or have guilt or shame over what happened over what happened. This too will bind them to secrecy. Some of the effects upon adults who are sexually abused as children are self-esteem. As an adult, you may feel that you have no rights, that you have no control in your life, or that you're a bad person. Emotions or feelings. As an adult, you may have difficulty identifying or expressing feelings, not trusting your feelings, or feel like your emotions are out of control. Relationships. As an adult, you may avoid closeness to avoid betrayal, become involved with abusive people, cling to people for approval, put other people's needs first because you don't feel you don't deserve to have your needs considered. Parenting. As an adult, you may find it hard to balance your needs with those of your children, be overprotective, or find it hard to show appropriate affection. Your body. As an adult, you may be disconnected from bodily sensations, feel bad about your body, inflict pain and injury on yourself, or abuse alcohol, drugs, and food. As believers, if we suspect a child is in trouble, we must be wise. This topic is beyond volatile. If an innocent person is accused of child harm in any way, it doesn't matter whether he's guilty or not. This person's life as he knew it is over, and he will be under the shadow of guilt, even if proven innocent, for years to come. All common sense disappears, and hate-mongering is all that remains. I'll give you a personal example of that. A brother posted a link on my Facebook that said, high school between 1970 and 2015, the difference between the two. And there's one point that I thought would apply to this message. Johnny falls on the playground and skins his knee. He is found by his teacher, Mary, crying. Mary goes over and gives Johnny a hug. In 1970, Johnny would feel better later, and life would go on. Today, Mary would be accused of being a sexual predator. She would lose her job, face up to 3 years in prison. Johnny would undergo 5 years of therapy. Now, how does that apply to me? Well, I take the same route to work every day, and also when I'm going to Mariana. I have to be to work at 7 in the morning. And along the way, at the end of Blue Springs Road, there's a short stretch of road that goes into Blue Spring. And on my way to work, there is a maybe junior high or high school girl standing in her yard waiting for a school bus. Well, as I go by, I waved. And then for a few days, I would go by there, I would wave at this girl and go on about my business, and go on to work. Well, one day, as I was coming home from work, I was trailing the school bus to drop her off. And when she got off the bus, she took off running towards the house to look at me, and her eyes were this big around. And at that point, I thought about this because, as it applies to me, a gesture of being a good neighbor has been turned into something evil. And if I'd have known that was going to happen, I would have never.
It doesn't take a child, just a few words to put you under the gun.
And such it is. And I'm telling, and I want, yeah. And these are the things. This is the kind of world that we live in today. And all I know is I'm a survivor of this, and I'm not going to be skulking around in the dark, nameless and faceless. I have a name, I have a face. This happened to me. I've been restored by the grace of my Father, and this is the message that I preach to those that are still hurting. I know what it's like. I know what it's like to be strung out on dope to where I didn't know what day of the week it was. I know what it's like to self-mutilate. I know what it's like to suffer, to not know where, to not know basic things, because that was all taken away from me. And only by the grace of Father, I'm who I am today. And as I always say, and I believe this, if my Father can help me, He can help anybody. So these are some of the things that I deal with. And may His will be done.
Steer clear of the little kids unless, they're closer to you and stuff like that. Anytime I was ever with anybody and they had a daughter, I didn't bathe them. They always bathed their own little girl.
Right.
Right.
Yes. Now let me see where I'm at here. We have somebody that survived far worse than I did. To give you an example of what kind of things that people have to get out and deal with, you do this. Lauren Cavanaugh pushes through her pain to build a life of hope. This is written by Scott Farwell of the Dallas newspaper. Lauren is alone in the dark. She's naked, sitting cross-legged in her own filth, eyes focused on a sliver of light. It's all she has, that light. It glows from underneath a locked closet door, and Lawrence discovered if she stares at it long enough, her mind will open a portal to another place. Several days after Lauren's rescue in June 2001, authorities took this photo where she was held prisoner, and it's bad. Inside the Hutchins mobile home of Barbara and Kenneth Atkinson. Doctors says that how she survived all these years of starvation, solitude, and sexual torture, they call it disassociation, the psyche's ability to float away from the pain. Lauren calls it her escape hatch. It's been a dozen years since Lauren was rescued from that wretched back room of a mobile home in Hutchins and became known as the girl in the closet. News of the case and the arrest of her mother and stepfather shocked and sickened the nation. Little Lauren looked like a Holocaust survivor. Bloated belly, protruding ribs, arms as big around as quarters. When she arrived in the emergency room at Children's Medical Center the night of June 11th, 2001, at 8 years old, she weighed 25.6 pounds, the size of an average 2-year-old, and was damaged in ways doctors had never seen. A lot has happened in Lauren Cavalau's life since then. Earlier this year, she graduated from high school at age 20 and enrolled at Trinity Valley Community College in Athens, a few miles from the rural home she shares in Canton with her adoptive mother, 3 dogs, and a squawking parrot. For the first time in years, Lauren's off medication for depression and bipolar disorder. She's exercising, talking more, and seems to have new energy and optimism. There were a lot of tough years there, says Sabrina Cavanaugh, who along with her husband Bill finalized the adoption of Lauren about a year after she was rescued. Sometimes I wasn't sure we were going to make it, but all things considered, Lauren is doing great. I think we may have turned a corner. By the courts, which took her from loving adoptive parents despite ample signs of danger, by her biological mother and stepfather, who then abused her in almost every way short of murder, by other family members who held Lauren on their laps but say they never noticed that she was scarred or starving, by Child Protective Service investigators who lost track of her even though every month her mother got a state welfare check. Lauren's road back has been long and bumpy. There have been years of psychotherapy and hundreds of doctor visits, fits of rage, long nights of tears and terror, suicide attempts, fistfights, handfuls of mood-altering drugs. None of those are unusual for victims of severe child abuse who often struggle with lifelong emotional problems. But Lauren's challenges were greater than most. During 6 key years for growth and development from age 2 to age 8, she was deprived of nourishment and stimulation, which resulted in brain atrophy. Equally important, she missed a million lessons learned by toddlers and young children: how to trust, how to cope with disappointment, give and receive affection. Dr. Barbara Rilla, a Dallas psychologist who specializes in the treatment of severely abused children, visited Lauren in the hospital days after she was rescued. If you would have asked me then, I would have told you that there was very little future and hope for this youngster. I'd never seen a child who was so very broken physically and emotionally. Lauren did not know how to sit in a chair, hold a pencil, recite her ABCs. She was not potty trained, didn't recognize the sun, or know what grass felt like under her feet. Rilla knew what that meant. From birth to age 6, children's brains triple in size, producing cells at a dizzying rate, establishing critical neural connections. It would be impossible for Lauren to regain those lost years, or for her adoptive parents to recreate the psychological experiences and teach complex emotions such as empathy, sympathy, along with morals and values. Studies by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention and others suggested Lauren faced a bleak future: antisocial behavior, crime, drug and alcohol abuse, disease, and early death. Lauren does have deficits, but so far She has beaten the long odds against her. Not by making up for lost time, but by understanding her weaknesses and figure out ways to compensate for them. The fact that we're talking about her graduating from high school, that she has reflective thoughts, that she has a relationship with her adopted mother, that she can talk about things that happened in her past, these are amazing and remarkable. Hallelujah. Barbara Atkinson said she never bonded with Laura, the second of her 6 children. It was the problem, she told the Dallas Morning News reporter in 2002. The only interview she granted, out of sight, out of mind. I shut it away and I don't think of it. Let me get on here. Well, enough of that. I think y'all get the picture. This girl is going to make it. She's fought hard. And these things are out there. And again, for me, I understand this firsthand. And it's my hope that my Father can use me to help somebody in some of these situations. And you may be wondering, how can a person fully recover from such as this? And I can speak of my own experience and how my Father has helped me. John chapter 3, verses 1 through 6. And there was a man of the Pharisees, Nicodemus was his name, a ruler of the Yehudim. This one came to Yeshua by night and said to him, Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher from Elohim, and that no one is able to do these signs you do, if Elohim is not with him. Yeshua answered and said, Truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is born of water and of the Spirit, he is unable to see the reign of Elohim. And Nicodemus said to him, How is a man able to be born when he is old? Is he able to enter his mother's womb a second time and be born? Yeshua answered, Truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is born of water and of the Spirit, he is unable to enter the reign of Elohim. That which has been born of flesh is flesh, and that which has been born of spirit is spirit. 2 Corinthians 5:17. Therefore, if anyone is in Messiah, he is a renewed creature. The old matters have passed away. See, all matters have become renewed. 2 Corinthians 10, verses 4 through 6. For the weapons we fight with are not fleshly, but in Elohim, for overthrowing strongholds, overthrowing reasonings, taking every high matter that exalts itself against the knowledge of Elohim, and taking every thought captive to make it obedient to Messiah. Isaiah 40, 28 through 31. Do you not know, have you not heard, the everlasting Elohim Yahweh, creator of the ends of the earth, neither faints or is weary. His understanding is unsearchable. He gives power to the faint. To those who have no might he gives strength. Even youth shall faint and be weary, and young men stumble. But those who wait on Yahweh will renew strength. They will raise up the wing like eagles. They run and are not weary. They walk and do not faint. 1 John chapter 2, 5 and 6. But whoever guards his word, the love of Elohim has been perfected in him. By this we know that we are in him. The one who says he stays in him ought to walk himself as he walked. Matthew chapter 12, verses 46 through 50. And while he was still talking to the crowds, see, his mother and brothers stood outside, seeking to speak with him. One said to him, See, your mother and brothers are standing outside, seeking to speak with you. But he answering said to the one who spoke to him, Who is my mother, and who are my brothers? Having stretched out his hand towards his taught ones, he said, See, my mother and my brothers. Whoever does the desire of my Father who is in the heavens is my mother, brothers, and sisters. Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. I call upon you, therefore, brothers, through the compassion of Elohim, to present your bodies a living offering, set apart, well-pleasing to Elohim, your reasonable worship. And do not be conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you can prove that which is good and well-pleasing and perfect will of Elohim. I'm sure that you've seen religious tracts in public restrooms or on park benches that tell you you're going to hell if you don't get saved. And that all you have to do is read a few scriptures, pray a prayer, and you're in. My personal experience, after believing this for 30 plus years, has told me that that's not the case. In John chapter 3, where Yeshua tells Nicodemus that he must be born again, it means just that. One must realize that they are at the end of their rope, there is nothing left, and the only thing to do is believe in our Father. This is the beginning. As a newborn believer, just like a newborn infant, one must learn to walk and talk all over again. One must be willing to change oneself and relearn how to walk like our Messiah. This takes time, sometimes a long time. If one is patient and waits on Elohim, as in Psalm 27 verse 14, Elohim will make himself more apparent to the individual. I believe this to be born again. This takes a renewing of one's thought processes. Those of us who are recovering from abuse have suffered immensely. Our ability to love and trust has been destroyed. We have immersed ourselves in drugs, alcohol, other addictions that has left us fragmented in our thinking. One must learn how to renew the mind and take on the mind of our Messiah. This, I believe, is surrounding oneself with like-minded believers with strong faith who can be available to help the newborn through life's issues that the newborn once hid from or tried to medicate away. One must learn how to renew their strength in Elohim in this way, and thus learn how to walk in the steps of Yeshua Messiah. The wristbands all of us have seen that say WWJD cannot be worn like some kind of cheap jewelry. They must be incorporated into one's mind, soul, and spirit. It will be clumsy at first. But the more one practices how to walk like Messiah and not walking alone with no one and nothing, the more one grows in their knowledge of Elohim, the more Elohim gives to the individual. Keep in mind that Yahweh wants to love us and bless us, and he does that sometimes without us even realizing it. But he doesn't just give it away. He expects us to respond to him and be willing to learn more and do more. There may be setbacks and there will be rough days ahead. But as long as one doesn't give up and continues to fight to know Elohim more and more each day, the more Elohim nurtures the individual by giving them hope and surrounding them with people to help them grow in their faith. And then one day, the one who was truly born again will realize that the old father or caregiver who, instead of loving, caring for them, abused, neglected, or otherwise harmed them, is gone. And a new father who is pure love, in 1 John 4:8, will be one's new father. And the old brothers and sisters who weren't there when you needed them for whatever reason will be gone. And a new family of brothers and sisters will be given. Brothers and sisters who learn how to love one another the same way Elohim loved us, by giving his only Son for us, so that all of us might live through him. Yahweh bless.